Hello and welcome to Say Hi to the Future, Ingenious Thinkers, a podcast aimed at highlighting the human side of ingenuity. My name is Ken Tencer, curator of Say Hi to the Future, helping leaders think differently in the face of uncertainty and ambiguity. Better thinking, better outcomes. With me today is Doug McCollough, CEO at Color Coded Labs and CIO at the City of Dublin, Ohio. Doug McCollough, welcome to Say Hi to the Future.
Good morning. Hello.
So, Doug, the rest of the world is moving from global to local. And when I'm following you, you're moving from local to global. I see South America, I see Asia. What are you speaking about? What makes this a critical platform?
Well, it's interesting. I am speaking, I guess the main concept that allows all of us to connect is smart cities. But that being said, I speak on intelligent communities and smart cities and all of the things that go with that, whether it be sustainability, workforce, innovation, sometimes inclusion, whether that be digital inclusion or other things. But all communities are facing some of the same issues and needs, and some of the same innovation seems to be advancing much, much faster. So the interesting thing to me is meeting people who are attempting to address this on a local level, but somewhere else. So I am really dealing with kind of local interests and concerns, but how do they do that in Taiwan? I visited 4 cities in Taiwan, Taoyuan, New Taipei City, Hsinchu, which is really amazing, and just looking at how they deal with their chip manufacturing and how that fits in with the rest of their economy. Well, in Ohio, we're pretty interested in that now. How are we going to make that work? And in Brazil, also there with the Intelligent Community Forum, seeing some of the local farming and the local community development that they're doing, and meeting the people who are doing this in the local government or local activists and things like that is very instructive for me, because I'm trying to figure out how we can do it better in Central Ohio.
I understand you mentioned a lot of the components going into a smart city. What is that smart city in the end? What do you hope to achieve by making a city smart? I mean, for the city and its community.
That's a great question. A smart city at the end of the day, if it were successful and complete, should just be a city. It should be a city that's enhanced, better at what it does, more responsive to citizens, high quality of life, highly secure and safe, those kinds of things. And so I think we get lost in the smart city name. At the end of the day, you're trying to apply technologies, you're trying to use data, make analytics, you're trying to automate systems, you're trying to lower costs, you're trying to make sure that you're reaching all sorts of people. The ideal smart city in the future would just be a great city. It would be just the absolute best place to live. People would be comfortable. Things would be responsive to them. There would be very little line between their own technology agents and services and the cities and the publics. And this is an issue for us today, because we're struggling to figure out how do we as humans interact with other humans, other groups, other governments, other cultures, new people into our community. What are the right protocols today? We're using an outdated and old way of thinking about things. And it's my belief, kind of as a futurist, that we can use technology to enhance or embrace the future.
100 years ago or so, we enhanced our cities with drainage, with electricity, with the basic infrastructure. This sounds to me like the new necessary infrastructure for better life in what are becoming obviously much more crowded, much more populous situations.
That's absolutely right. And if you think back to rail or electricity or drainage or the movement away from agriculture towards more industrial economy, and the movement of people and immigration during those times, you think about the racism and the sexism and the really challenging human things we believe that we are facing for the first time today, right? And it's like, no, if you think about history and the introduction of new technologies, it was always very scary. and very concerning, and people fought against it. And I think that's very instructive as we look at, people are pretty scared of autonomous vehicles and artificial intelligence and things like that. But, we haven't even really dealt with quantum computing and low Earth orbit satellites and space research. And there's a lot more coming than artificial intelligence. So the question becomes, if we know that this has resulted in unrest, misgivings, concerns, angst amongst populations, how do people in my position introduce it, communicate about it, and help people thrive in something that you cannot change, right? You cannot stop technical advancement, but you can prepare for it, and you can thrive in it. And the communities of the future, the successful ones, are the ones which are investing today in this change.
So you're talking about smart cities, but now you introduce the notion of community. And there's a difference between where people are and how people interact, which is how I see community. What about the smaller communities? Because look, I'm come to you from Toronto. We see what a lot of major cities do: double digit, 15 to 20% vacancy rate in downtown buildings, conversion of those office towers possibly to living situations, because people don't want to work there anymore. So what happens to communities outside of cities? How do we look to the future of where next gen wants to live and how they want to behave? So it's not just a smart city, but I guess an intelligent community is something you speak to.
Yeah, I believe that, and I do use the term community because I think it's important. The way we have organized cities, and we will always have cities, we want to live in dense places, but it's not the appropriate living situation. And even within cities, there are communities. I think about in the Columbus area, there are numerous communities which have special requirements, have unique characteristics. There are immigrant communities, there are there's still racial communities, there are economic divisions, there are all sorts of things that many of us might say, well, this shouldn't exist, but it does exist today. And how do we allow people to live together in cultures of their choice, and benefit in some sort of an inclusive way to the common and collective resources that we have? And in the past, that would be parks and public systems, roads, sidewalks, those kinds of things. And today it's more like broadband. But then, what about software agents? What about voting? How are we going to make choices in the future? And so those are very interesting things to me. That you're going to have buildings or districts in a downtown area with more population density than a village in a rural area just outside of town. Both of those are communities. And so I think also an interesting thing is that with broadband, that more rural community outside of town has access, or can have access, to the same technologies that the inner city has. They can have broadband, they can have software agents, they can have those things. And so I think we're going to find some interesting developments in those communities, and I want to work in both of them. I really have questions, and when I do visit these places outside the country, I do look at rural areas as well as more urban, dense areas. And I will say this last thing about this: I don't know that the way that we have structured local government in terms of cities with a city council and a mayor or a city manager or those kinds of things, I don't know that that is the sustainable model going forward. It's not fast enough, it's not responsive enough, and it needs to adapt and grow and scale. And that may be scaling downward as well as scaling upwards. But I'm very interested in what's going to happen and helping our world prepare for really a different paradigm.
So the part of the equation, I mean, we're talking about cities, we're talking about, you had mentioned structure of government, local government, the people.
Mm-hmm.
You hear so much about there will be no jobs, there will be no whatever, but what you're suggesting is different careers, different career paths. And how are we preparing people for smart cities versus, what we've been in the past, more hands-on, I guess, in many ways.
Well, because this is Say Hi to the Future, I'll just go really crazy here, and because you guys can handle really different concepts. I would actually not abandon, but I would step back from the word career or job or employment. I would step back from those concepts. We have had an economy which is based on someone having some resources, using that to create an enterprise, and then hiring humans to perform work that only those humans could do, then growing and scaling. The value of that enterprise is high. You sell it to another enterprise or you buy other enterprises, and you use humans in order to advance those kinds of things. I believe we're entering into a transitional kind of period in which humans add value. You're already seeing from enterprises a desire to step away from paying humans for what I grew up in my career:
Mm-hmm.
healthcare, a 40-hour work week, weekends off, a specific job that I did. If I wanted a different job, or they wanted me to do something different, I was promoted into a different job category or job title.
Right.
Those things are disappearing. You now have an opportunity to have a group of humans who could do anything potentially. They can learn on the fly, and you're kind of hiring or engaging them for totally different reasons: their adaptability, their resilience, their creativity, their location. And then you're plugging and playing according to opportunities of the moment. I don't know that that's going to be employment in the future. And a human can scale up to adding enormous amount of value to multiple so-called enterprises, and enterprises can have zero employees or they can have millions of employees. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
Based on a value exchange. And you just see pushback coming from workers who don't want to live where they're told, don't want to come to the offices as they're told, and enterprises who don't want to maintain any type of social contract with their employees. And I think that that's the future. I think we're going to have, I have the capacity of doing this particular thing. You engage me for that. I add this amount of value. We negotiate for the compensation, and I move on to the next thing, and you move on to the next human. And for better or for worse, I think that's a scenario that we're probably headed towards.
What I find interesting, though, is, and yes, absolutely, where and how we work and whose terms it's on are changing. Because Say Hi is human ingenuity. I mean, one of the things that I fully believe in is that the lack of human contact that's sitting behind a screen, it is going to have a very negative impact on society and our ability to be social human beings. So what is the balance between, yes, you can work at home, but no, you really need to interact with your colleagues, because you talk about diversity, and I'll talk about capital D diversity, meeting anybody other than yourself.
Mm-hmm.
It is not the same experience as having a coffee with somebody, or being in a meeting room and learning empathy and reading body language.
Yeah, I think that what we see as the infrastructure of today is not necessarily the infrastructure tomorrow. And this is a transition. And today we interact with screens, and it really is a technical marvel that we're even able to do this. But I
Mm-hmm.
don't think that that will be the case. And I don't think a rejection of work from home is a rejection of working socially and working in human contact. I think everybody desires that. We just don't like the offices we've been presented with, and the traffic
Okay.
and the expense. But we do actually would love to work downtown on a rooftop, and and I think that landowners and developers are changing spaces to recognize that they may not get a 5 to 10 year uh, uh, kind of lease from a large company. It's going to be different, but that does not mean that as humans we are not going to interact with each other. um, and I do think that that kind of teamwork, and I'm seeing it even now. I've set up an office in my basement, but I work with clients. I work at client sites. I work in conference rooms. I work in coffee. And I find that even some of the networking events and the meetups and those kinds of things that at the beginning of my career took place inside the building of the big corporation I was in, and you met up with different interest groups within that building. Now you meet up with people from 30 different companies. You talk about interesting things. You might start a company. You might establish a mentorship. You might network with someone. You might learn something. You might join a boot camp. It's chaotic. And if you come from a traditional environment, it might look as though in that person's company, they're not interacting with other humans. But in one's career, in one's professional life, in one's life, the lines have blurred between my personal and social and business and professional. But I'm adding value to 10 different enterprises, and I'm using technology. I will also say that some of these screens and everything, this is not the technology we're always going to have. This is 40 years old. It's not like we always worked with screens. And I think we're going to have wearables, and we use voice commands, and there's a lot of different ways. Even now, many of us walk around talking to our watch. The message comes in on the watch. You reply to the message on the watch, right? Because the important value is in your brain, right? And so I don't think that we should assume that we are not already remixing our human interactions with each other to optimize the productivity that is being generated, not necessarily within that enterprise, but it's being generated by me, the individual. And so we're shifting the value sort of negotiation to individual humans and groups, and less to enterprises, cities, the traditional structures of social organization of the past.
Well, you know what? Thank you for that, Doug. And I want to brings a different perspective or understanding of how we interact too. Because you're in Columbus, I'm going to cross a shameless bridge here because you touched on spaces. Say Hi to the Future, going into our 4th year in terms of inventive activations in Columbus. We're going to be talking about moving from spaces to places this year. And Sackett Valley, my partner, who you know, talks about that bridge as being the humanity or the human side of it. So how we move from that physical, as you said, space we go into that we've traditionally gone to a place that we want to go and interact and build community in a different way, in a different surrounding, probably without all those wonderful cubicles we're told to go in and be creative within. So I just bring that up because it's a wonderfully important conversation, and it is actually one that we're having in Columbus. So thank you for crossing into that area.
Sure. Yeah.
The other thing, and this is related to Columbus and getting down to the individuals who are going to hold these jobs or hold these roles. I mean, one of the things you are is a co-founder of Black Tech Columbus. So tell us about that. Tell us about, just start with this technology and learning for technology in general, because obviously how we approach work, how we need to learn, and what we're learning about is different. And then please, if you want to carry on to Black Tech Columbus, that's
Yeah.
wonderful.
So it's an interesting thing. I haven't had some of my thoughts refined as I'm presenting them to you about the future economy and how individuals will add value and how the power in the dynamic is going to shift towards the individual. And we saw the pendulum swing over there where, some really high salaries and individuals, were able to do some things. The pendulum is swinging back, and enterprises are now in the position of power. But that stuff is kind of irrelevant to me. If you look at a broader future, not in a 2-year or 3-year cycle, but look in 10-year cycles, you see a shift to humans and even, families and small groups and people reorganizing themselves in order to gain the skills necessary to command value in a talent marketplace. And as I looked at that, I recognize that Black and brown and minority, whatever term you want to use, marginalized communities are at a significant risk of not participating in the economy of the future. And the economy of the future has landed 100 times, right? And And some people have benefited greatly because of timing and their proximity to it and their preparation for it, and they knew it was coming. And some people have been left behind time and again and again and again and again. And we can't afford that in our community. We can't afford to have whole groups of people in that situation. As a Black person myself, I recognize that my career success has come from who I knew, the relationships I had with them, the conversations I have. And as I look at other people in the technology space, I see many of them not having those conversations, not having those relationships, things like that. As a CIO at the time, I realized that I could add a lot of value to the Black community by co-founding with others Black Tech Columbus. And we did that so that we would be in a position to add value to each other. I've got a lot of requests to, can you mentor me? I want to be where you are. Can you be my mentor? And that doesn't scale, right? As an individual, you can mentor a lot of people, but you can't mentor everybody. But a group of people can mentor everybody. Like we could mentor every Black technology professional in Columbus. And that's what we're trying to do. Like everyone can have a mentor and a network and access to the information. And so I believe that those kinds of structures are what are going to make communities thrive. And you haven't asked me about my company, Color Coded Labs, as well, and some of those things, but I'll just mention Color Coded Labs provides technology skills to adults in our region to get them into, basically wealth creating technology career pathways. And what we're finding in the communities that are stepping forward is a lot of immigrant communities. We have a number of African communities in the central Ohio area. We have LGBTQ plus folks coming and helping to form their part of the community and gaining those skills that are necessary. Every marginalized community steps forward, and we have to create structures that provide the skills that are necessary to thrive in the future economy, not the present economy. And that's what Black Tech Columbus and Color Coded Labs do.
So, Doug, why the first interviews? Why do we have to have our screens on? I'm thinking, no, but seriously, I mean, and I'm not saying that eliminates prejudice as you go through the process, but isn't it just more important to find out if the person's intelligent on that first screening call, at least? Remove as much bias as we can.
Well, for sure. And I have thoughts on that as well. So let me just say, because I get fired up and I really love this stuff. Again, I honestly believe that that the value that someone can create for your organization is going to become the principal interest and concern to intelligent enterprises. And as the concept of us coming into work and working next to each other has been broken. It could be repaired and maybe we'll come back into offices or something like that, but it got broken. And I think we have found that some of the human interaction, the team interaction in the enterprise, in the downtown Class A office space that people came into, was disadvantaging a number of different people. The hiring process was disadvantaging. The advancement and promotion process was disadvantaging people. And when people started working from home, now you have avatars, you have blank screens, you have not using your voice, but you're just typing. And that's not great in terms of productivity, but it changed some things and it began to advantage other people. We began to see more women after having children come back and work because their children could be next to them or for various different reasons, and advantages began to flow. With artificial intelligence and some other things, I believe that we're not going to necessarily be able to tell who is a human and who is not a human. And we're not going to be caring. We don't care. A team of 8 may have 2 AIs, 3 people from overseas, and 2 people sitting in an office. And you're going to put problems in there and interact with them, and the technology will allow us to do this. And what's on the screen not only won't matter, but you might be able to change it. And I see no reason, Ken, that you couldn't be an NBA player or a person of another gender, or you're going to be able to select what you show to the world, and you could change that enterprise by enterprise. and you're going to be you're talking to me. How do you really know that I'm a human? Tomorrow, as long as I can communicate with you and we're getting moving work forward, I think that we will interact in new and interesting ways. So I caution the people in the world who would like a more stratified world where races and genders and sexualities are in their place. That ain't going to work out that way, because tech and enterprises that reject this technology, the AIs and those kinds of things, are going to fall away, and they're going to be beaten in the competitive marketplace by organizations and teams and communities that are able to just basically take their lunch money. That's my opinion.
You said something there. Well, you said a lot of things there that moved me, but the notion of there could be multiple AIs sitting around the table and you wouldn't know, or at the table and you wouldn't know. It wasn't long ago somebody said to me, what is your real vision or hope for, say, Hi to the Future? And that is for me. And I said to them, I want to have panels where there are 3 humans and 1 AI or 2 AIs speaking to one another, because for me, this is not just about furthering humanity or singularly about, for me to further humanity, you have to have the interaction between human and what will become artificial ingenuity understood and at play. So when you speak to that and having multiple AIs or having those conversations, that to me is a fascinating end goal for some of the things.
Yeah, I think it's coming, and I am fascinated by it as well. And you think about, for some of our Zoom calls or our video calls, we are now putting in agents that take the notes. We used to sit here and type those notes, right? And now not only does it record everything that everybody said and attribute it to individuals, it summarizes. So we don't have to read the whole transcript. It summarizes. Is that a team member? Is it a technology? And that's the interesting thing. Like, we begin layering these things in. If we gave it a name and it's now Jan, what's the difference, right? I mean, because we've always had people on the call who sit quietly and on mute. Why not? Let's call it a team member.
With me today, I've been talking with Doug McCollough, CEO at Color Coded Labs and CIO at the City of Dublin, Ohio. Doug, as our time comes to an end here today on our Say Hi to the Future revisit, just tell us one last thing. You've got a fiber to the home project. What is that?
So in the city of Dublin has been a fiber-focused kind of network community for a while. It's a smart city. It's an intelligent community. It hired a CIO. A lot of cities of their size don't do that kind of thing. They're focused on the future and focused on being really the most connected city in the country. And as part of that vision, they have recognized, as many communities have, that gaps in the experience of broadband and other, technology things that broadband can deliver, those gaps create a competitive disadvantage. They create gaps in service, gaps in experience. And when you're a community that is doing a pretty good job at a high quality of life, and let me be clear that this is something that's necessary for every community, including ones which are don't have great resources, more rural communities, every community. But Dublin sees itself as a place where it can experiment, try things. It's very entrepreneurial and it's very leadership based. And so it is fearless when it comes down to saying, look, we need to figure this fiber to the home thing out. And from a fiber perspective, the point here is that fiber broadband is more reliable and future proof than other types of broadband. And communities need to invest and participate in the build out of this infrastructure because we're not going to get there fast enough just with a competitive marketplace. Everybody wants to build these things, but not everyone wants to build them everywhere. And so you wind up with small pockets of no competition, poor service, and that tends to center around poorer less politically connected parts of the community. And what Dublin wants to do is eliminate that and create a situation where every single family, household, residence has access to high-speed fiber-based internet service. And check back with us in a couple of years. And this model can be sent to other communities as well. And that's a part of where Dublin is. Dublin doesn't think it's going to be the only place that does this. It just wants to be either first or very early on, and wants to be very advanced in delivering high quality service to a community, which, by the way, I think is going to be the role of government, local government in the future. It's going to be this high quality of life and being concerned with that, which is not what local governments did in the past, right? So this is just one type of thing that paints Dublin as a more experimental place, and I'm working on it elsewhere as well. I'm promoting it, and that's a part of my visits around the world, is also learning how this can be done everywhere. But Dublin is definitely a thought leader in this space.
Doug, as always, it's a pleasure. And whether we're talking about color-coded labs, Black Tech Columbus, your work as a CIO, what I appreciate so much is it's technology supporting humanity, bringing us together with purpose. And that's why I just love our discussion. So thank you again for being on Say Hi to the Future. And I know we'll chat soon.
Thank you very much.